Two people leave the same office building, same job title, same 5 years of tenure. Their paychecks hit checking within minutes of each other. One of them gets a text from her mechanic. Brake job, $470. Her stomach drops. She opens her banking app twice in the next hour, the way you check a wound to see if it's still bleeding. The other one paid for the exact same repair last Tuesday and hasn't thought about it since. The difference between them isn't discipline. It isn't intelligence. It isn't even income. It's a system. And the reason it works is the reason most people quietly refuse to use it. It's cold. It treats money the way a hospital treats blood. Functional, tracked, without the story attached. There's a category of person who simply doesn't experience money as an emotional event, not because they're rich. There are broke people in this category and high earners outside of it. They've just installed a different operating system. Most personal finance content describes the symptoms. This is about the architecture underneath. A note on the word dark. Nothing here is illegal. Nothing requires inherited wealth. The only thing that's dark about it is that it violates the unspoken social contract around money. The one that says you're supposed to feel things every time you spend, save, give, or refuse. The people this works for don't feel less. They've just stopped letting the feeling make the decision. Quick frame check before going further. Income is not the variable being discussed here. Roughly 16% of NFL players file for bankruptcy within 12 years of retirement, according to a widely cited study by Carlson, Kim, Lusardi, and Camara. The same pattern shows up in lottery winners, professional athletes across sports, sudden inheritance families, and high-earning specialists with seven-figure incomes and negative net worth. More money entering a broken system just means more money leaving it, faster. That's the entire reason this conversation has to start somewhere other than earn more. Principle 1. Decisions get made before they happen. Most people decide whether to save by looking at what's left after spending. The system flips that. Money moves to its destination automatically. Retirement, brokerage, a separate savings bank, the day the paycheck arrives, before any human being sees it or feels anything about it. Whatever survives in checking is what's available to spend. This sounds boring. It is boring. That's the point. It removes the moment of choice, which is also the moment of failure. Willpower is a finite resource. The people who never struggle with money have arranged their lives so that they almost never have to use it on small financial decisions. Sit with that for a second. The win isn't in heroically resisting the latte at 8:14 in the morning. The win is in never being asked the question. Here's the part that stings. If a person can't make the math work when the savings come out first, they almost never make it work when the savings are supposed to come out last. The order is the entire trick. There's no version of "I'll save what's left over" that ends well, and most people who try it for a year already know. Principle 2. The gap is the asset. Income gets all the attention. Wealth doesn't grow from income. It grows from the gap between income and spending multiplied by time. That is the whole equation. Every other piece of personal finance is either a way to widen the gap or a way to make the gap compound faster. Two people earning $80,000 a year, one with a $5,000 annual gap and one with a $20,000 gap, don't have the same financial life. They aren't even in the same conversation. After 10 years at a 7% annual return, and to be honest about it, that's a long-run historical equity average, not a guarantee, and there will be ugly years inside that average, the first person has roughly $69,000 invested. The second person has roughly $276,000. Same income, same decade, almost $250,000 of difference, sitting on no more skill than knowing the gap on purpose. Most people can't tell you their gap within $2,000. The people who don't struggle can tell you within 50. A small tangent worth stealing. Most personal finance content is written by people who, at minimum, are not broke right now. That's the trick of the genre. Advice is easier to deliver from a place of safety. Be a little suspicious of anyone who treats budgeting like a personality flaw rather than a load-bearing wall. The unglamorous version of this is the version that works. Principle 3. Consumer debt is treated as fire, not a tool. There's a useful split that the system makes early and never compromises on. Debt that buys an appreciating asset or future income, a sensible mortgage, a business loan with real underwriting, sometimes student loans for a degree with measurable return, sits in one category. Debt that pays for a depreciating asset or a moment of feeling, credit card balances, buy now, pay later furniture, a 14% auto loan on a car that exists mainly to impress acquaintances, sits in the other. The first category gets used carefully and watched closely. The second category gets treated like a kitchen fire. Not managed, not consolidated, extinguished, and then the matches get put away. A real number for context. The average American household carries somewhere around $6,000 in revolving credit card balances, at interest rates that have recently averaged above 20%. At that rate, $6,000 quietly bills the household roughly $1,200 a year in interest alone. That's a phone, a weekend trip, a small emergency fund being paid in cash every 12 months to a bank in exchange for nothing tangible. The reason most people don't operate this way is that consumer debt feels productive in the moment. Buying a couch on 6 months of zero interest feels like solving a problem. The system recognizes it as creating a future obligation in exchange for a present feeling. That's a trade. The people who don't struggle will make that trade rarely, and they'll do it with their eyes open. A small honesty break, because the brief here is honest. There are situations where consumer debt is not a choice. Medical events, job loss, caregiving responsibilities that make full-time work impossible. Low-wage work in a high-cost city where rent eats 60% of take-home before anything else moves. The system above doesn't apply with the same neatness when income barely covers survival. Pretending otherwise is one of the great quiet lies of this genre. If you're in that bracket, the relevant question isn't optimization, it's stabilization, and the rules look different. Principle 4. Spending is allocated, not approved. Here's the most counterintuitive habit in this group. They often spend more on the things they actually care about than the average person spends on those same things. The trick is, they spend almost nothing on the things they don't. Most people leak money in roughly 20 directions at once. Subscriptions they forgot, food they didn't enjoy, clothes that aren't worn after the first week, a car payment for a vehicle that mostly serves an audience that isn't paying attention. The system identifies the 2 or 3 categories that genuinely return joy, funds them generously, and ruthlessly compresses everything else. This sounds harsh. In practice, it's the opposite. It feels like permission. If travel is the thing, travel hard. If the apartment is the thing, pay for the apartment. The shift is in admitting on paper what the things actually are, and then refusing to spend on the imitations of them. Most people have never written that list. The people in this category wrote it years ago and update it twice a year. Principle 5. Time is the multiplier, and it doesn't negotiate. The hardest principle to feel is the one that does the most work. $1 invested at 25 is worth about $5 by 50 at a 7% annual return with no further contributions. Stretch that out to 65 and the same dollar is worth roughly 15. Sequence of returns matters. The decade you start in matters. Inflation eats into the headline number. Taxes do the rest. None of that changes the basic shape. Time is the variable that pays. The people who don't struggle with money started doing small, structurally correct things early. Not large, dramatic things, small ones. $200 a month, automated, at 22, never touched, beats $1,000 a month started at 40 across most working lifetimes. The system doesn't reward effort, it rewards early, boring repetition. This is also the principle that's hardest to act on, because the payoff is invisible for a decade. There is nothing satisfying about it in week 3. By year 15, it's the only thing that mattered. Worth pausing on the turning point this whole thing has been circling. The obvious advice for someone who struggles with money is to earn more. It's everywhere. It's not exactly wrong, it's just usually a distraction. Most income increases get absorbed within a year by lifestyle creep. Slightly nicer apartment, slightly nicer car, slightly more frequent takeout, leaving the gap exactly where it was, sometimes worse. Without architecture, more income is just more water through the same leaking pipe. The architecture is the unglamorous part nobody films, which is a clue about why the people who use it stay quiet about it. Here's the one thing worth doing this week. Not 5 things. 1. Open a separate savings account at a different bank than the one your paycheck lands in. A different bank specifically. Friction is a feature, not a bug. Set up an automatic transfer for the day after payday, for an amount that's slightly uncomfortable but not unreasonable. 5% of net pay is a fine starting number if there isn't one already running. 10% if the budget has room. Then forget about it for 90 days. That's it. That's the whole move. It does 3 things at once. It widens the gap by force. It removes the decision from the moment of temptation. And it builds the only muscle that actually matters here, which is the muscle of letting money leave for its job before it has a chance to argue with you about staying. The dark part isn't darkness. It's just the willingness to stop having a feeling about every dollar. Most people won't do this. Not because they can't. Most people genuinely could find that 5%. Because it's quiet, and it doesn't post well, and the results don't show up for a year. The ones who do it stop being the person who checks the banking app twice in an hour after a $400 break job. One last thing. Everything covered here is descriptive, not prescriptive. It describes what a particular relationship with money looks like from the outside. It doesn't promise wealth, and it doesn't account for every situation a person can be in. Use what fits. Ignore what doesn't. The point was never to follow the system. The point was to notice that there is one.